My question is, I believe it came up a couple of times where, and I wish I could remember better. It was possible
You're younger than me.
for all the good that does. Um, there was a belief that the hospital's pulse oximeter was not working correctly because it was showing a lower reading than the one that you owned.
Are you talking about when I was in the hospital or when Jessica was in the hospital?
Let's go with when you were in the hospital.
All right.
Were there times when your pulse oximeter was showing a higher reading than the hospital's?
Yes.
Okay. And as I understand it, you tended to believe that the one you owned was more accurate than the one in the hospital.
Well, it wasn't a tendency to believe. It was based on what the nurse told me.
Okay. And what was it that the nurse told you?
Well, the morning of the 9th is when I realized that that was the situation, because when I wanted to feed Grace, she ran in and said, "You can't do that." I said, "Well, what's the reason?" And she said, "Her oxygen saturation's only at 85%. And, Grace was doing great. So I thought, this is impossible. It can't be 85%. So that's the first time I measured Grace's oxygen with my own meter. So I pulled it out, and this was maybe, 5-10 minutes later when it dawned on me, this can't be right. So I pulled it out. I measured Grace's oxygen. It measured 95%. And so I called the nurse back in and asked her if my meter was accurate. And she said, yes, it is. I said, well, then why is my meter reading 10 points higher than your meter? And this is the meter she's reading from the nurse's station, because there's a window that she can see the screen. And she said, well, because the leads get sweaty. And so then I said, if that's a known fact, why aren't you proactively changing out the leads, given that this is the primary statistic you're using to manage my daughter's care?
Did she have an answer for that?
Oh, yeah, she had an answer. I thought you never asked. She shook her finger at me and said, you should just be thankful you caught this. And that was the first day when I realized, up until that point, I had not really connected the dots as to what's going on. But then at that point, I was on guard.